Okay guys, this is part 2 of my toothpick cushion servo gear mod that I'm trying here. Okay, so if you get separated from the first video, basically all I've done so far is taking my gimbal off the bottom, flip the unit upside down, supporting the main body with the rags underneath there. I've left my props on. This side is now done, complete. I use a 1.5 millimeter Allen screw to break them loose. The screws here and the screws that are in the both halves of the servo gear. You got some Phillips head screws and you've got some Allen head screws. So I use this to break them loose, and then I use a small multi-screwdriver set to take them out real quick with, because the little flathead fits in there just perfectly to run them out really fast. Got everything organized. Of course, I still did the recommended 3M tape for the cushion on the either side of the worm gear, as you can see here. And the tape cuts real nicely. Put it on there. On this one, I did take off the landing gear, and when you're pulling it out of the holder here, you don't want to twist. You just want to loosen this screw here and then just pull it straight out, because obviously it has these things on the end. And originally on the other one, I tried to twist a little bit, and I was like, I didn't want to force it, and it's because it has that on there. So it just slides in, so that way it always holds the right angle here, so that these can't be off. So once again, that just slips in there. So all you need to do is take that screw out, and it'll pop right out. Then of course, very gently take it apart. Now, one thing I wanted to point out is these things really can't go back together wrong per se, unless you try and force something. But on the other side, this gear here, depending on what side you take apart first, this part here wants to fall out. So on this one, I chose to take it apart and leave this one in place. It has the nice little groove there on both sides, so that you know it's going back in right. You also want to pay attention to what position this is in, because it's going to be pushing up against the micro switch. It's going to be pushing up against the micro switch here. So you want to know, not necessarily exactly where it is or anything like that, but you want to know what micro switch it was pushing against when you take it out. If you were to run this all the way into the middle of the threads, you might not remember which side you need to run this to for the install, which switch you want to run it against. So I just left it towards the 3/4 towards the upper part of this side. That way when I put it back in, I can run it back up and push the micro switch so that the micro switch depresses, and it'll be left in the same position that it was when I took it off. Not that, I don't know what would happen if I left it in a neutral position. I imagine as soon as I armed it, it would go one way or the other, and that probably wouldn't be good, having one go up or one go down. So anyways, when you put it back in, put it back like you got it out, depressing the proper micro switch. Not sure if it matters or not, but I'm not sure what would happen. Okay, so obviously on the other side, I wasn't sure what I had to take apart initially. So just these two screws. So it's just these two screws, and then the landing gear comes off. For those of you that haven't taken the landing gear off for any reason, mine came fully assembled, so I had never even taken it off. But take those two off, it pops right out. Okay, what's next? I didn't use any magnetized screwdrivers. Some of the guys that know more than me on the site said not to use any magnetized screwdrivers due to the GPS system, and that sounds good to me. One less problem to deal with. I wouldn't want something to go wrong. Okay, so what I did here, on the other video, I used toothpicks to support behind. You can see right there I'm touching it. I just used a toothpick to support behind the micro switch. That way when this gear slams this way and slams this way, not only will you have the cushion on each side to damper that and give support above and below the micro switch, you also have the support behind the micro switch, because there was a gap there. There was a gap right here behind where it would let this micro switch flex. So I said that I was originally going to do the toothpick mod on one side and then use a dab of glue behind on the other side. But after having looked at it a little bit more closely, and the toothpick worked so well, it fit right in there perfect. I just put a tiny little touch of glue where it touches the casing here, not the micro switch here, just so there would be any glue actually touching the micro switch. There's one guy online that used glue and the micro switch stopped working. So but the toothpick worked great on that side. When you put it back together, it's much easier having this gear, this half of the servo laying down. That way when you put it back together, this isn't trying to fall out. But like I said before, if it's not in there exactly right, it's not going to let you close up shop and have it incorrect. So I think that's about it. I'm going to be putting this back together like I did the other side, and hopefully everything will be good, and I'll post this online. One other thing is, make sure your connections where you're going to put your tape is totally clear of any grease, so that they stick nicely. I wouldn't want those to come off inside. You see the tape there. You wouldn't want them to come off inside and start floating around during the operation of the landing gear and have it get caught up. But what I did do is, after I got it nice and clean, I did touch it up with just a little bit of grease back to the essential areas, just some that I had to wipe off, not a lot. And I'll put it back together and we'll be good to go. All I used was a pair of needle nose pliers. Flashlight came in handy, of course, a couple toothpicks. Now, one thing I do want to mention is, you don't want to put the toothpick end down in there and just snap it off. These micro switches here are very delicate, and you wouldn't want to break them loose from the board. So I put them down in there and then just used a pair of scissors and cut off just a tiny, let's see if I have a sliver here. Yeah. Just a tiny sliver there, and then wedged it behind there with a, with a little flathead screwdriver with just a little tiny dab of glue on the side that's touching the casing, not the micro switch. And I'm sure that will never go anywhere. So this is just a little extra insurance for the micro switches, to hold them firmly in place so that they don't bend back and forth from the force of the servo gear, the worm gear, moving back and forth to pressing those little buttons on the front. So put it all back together and we'll be good to go. Any of you guys that are worried about doing this, taking it apart, it's one of those things. Take it apart real slowly, be organized with your screws and whatnot. Don't over tighten stuff, and put it all back together the same way, but don't be scared of it. It's not that bad, and hopefully this will work out good, and I hope this helped some of you guys. Thanks.